It could be any river, weaving its way through pastures and places to join another, or to meet the sea. But this one is different. It's both majestic and something of a mess, famous and infamous. It once nurtured the salmon, and went on to do the same of a large part of the northwest population and industry. It begot a great city, and its banks and beyond teemed with buildings, people and industry, producing great wealth. Such massive activity, however, brought about the river's virtual death, because much of the waste of the Industrial Revolution went into its waters. It became the mucky Mersey, an inspiration to musicians, writers and artists, and now a challenge to those who are well on with the long and expensive task of cleaning it up. The Mersey begins in Stockport, where two other rivers meet, the Goyt and the Tame. These have become much cleaner after big investment in sewers and sewage treatment. The Mersey flows through Cheadle, Northenden and Didsbury. Here at Warrington, the river changes its character for the remaining 29 miles to the sea. Soon after Warrington, it becomes a small and shallow basin, narrowing between Widnes and Runcorn. Soon it spreads dramatically into its main basin, very shallow at low tide. Nearby at Ince, the river's at its broadest, some 3 miles, with shallow channels at low tide. Below Eastham, it slims again into a straight, narrow channel. On the right bank is Liverpool and Bootle, and on the left, Bebbington, Birkenhead and Wallasey. It's at New Brighton and the sea where the Mersey's journey ends. But the Water Authority's clean-up plans and work extend beyond the Mersey estuary and the river itself. All eyes are now on what's known as the Mersey Basin, a vast tract of land and polluted watercourses from the estuary to the Pennines. And it's going to cost over £2,000 million in the next 25 years to bring the rivers and streams in this basin up to scratch. And it's already happening. The problems are both on the ground and under it, for the quality of any river is governed by what's put into it. So good sewage treatment works and sewers are essential, especially as the Mersey drains some 700 square miles and takes the waste treated and untreated from 5 million people and countless factories. The river picks up pollution from other waters, Sankey and Ditton Brooks, the rivers Weaver and Gowie, and its equally famous partner for much of its journey, the Manchester Ship Canal, a very quiet passage to and from the sea these days. But it's all rush here, Howley Weir, a mile from the centre of Warrington, the turbulent marker of the Mersey's tidal limit. From here on, it becomes the estuary where much of the clean-up is now going on, because pollution increases. The reason is that the narrow bits downstream are a virtual bottleneck. From this spot, it can take up to 30 days for pollutants to finally reach the sea. They slosh up and down, pendulum-like, on each tide. 7 steps forward, then 5 back, as it were. Widnes has a showpiece monument to modern bridge building, but it was a very late developer as far as sewage treatment's concerned. Until fairly recently, sewage from this important chemical manufacturing centre went straight into the handy Mersey, completely untreated. But now Widnes has its first ever sewage works, costing £4.5 million, money well spent. And there's more, £8 million worth of new and improved sewers for the town and neighbouring Runcorn, ensure that waste ends up where it should, at the sewage works. Few people realise that most of Liverpool's sewage, and that from Bootle, Crosby and Litherland, goes directly into the Mersey. Millions of gallons every day from one of the world's best-known cities. It's discharged from 26 outfalls. Across the water, it's a similar story. Massive amounts of crude sewage discharged from numerous outfalls. Wallasey, Bebbington, Bromborough and Birkenhead all have contributed their shameful share of the Mersey's daily pollution. About 80% of the crude discharges from Wirral were from these two outfalls between Seacombe and Woodside Ferry landing stages. The Woodside outfall has a grand name for its grotty roll. It's called the Great Culvert. It's really the River Birkenhead, culverted to get it through dockland to the estuary. A breath of fresh air is called for, but even on the estuary's foreshore you can't always escape the pollution. Congealed lumps of fat and grease and other objectionables are sometimes left behind by the receding tide, and the mess can be stranded for weeks. A whole series of reports and action plans have thrown light on the Mersey pollution for decades, but the task and the cost of improvements were devastating. There never seemed to be a right time to begin in a big way. North West Water inherited this legacy and set about planning the first major phase of improvements. It was obviously going to be a long and expensive haul. Many months before the Warrington Conference in 1983, which was convened to push along aspects of rejuvenating the Mersey Basin, much more than just the Mersey itself, North West Water had announced its plans to clean up the estuary and had even begun the work. The conference meant business. Delegates discussed improving a shoddy environment and creating the scene for development on the banks of rivers and beyond. The Mersey was the thread running through it all, and the Water Authority was to set the pace, backed by government, by committing yet more millions. In less than 10 years, North West Water will have invested £170 million on cleaning up the estuary alone. 40 million is being spent on transforming this redundant Liverpool dock into this. A big new treatment works to cope with a very big problem. The dock was drained and vast quantities of silt had to be moved. The operation left a hole big enough to hold 22 football pitches and deep enough to accommodate a 6-storey building. Construction work continues and everything's on target for completion at the end of 1988. The end is in sight for those massive discharges of untreated sewage along the waterfront. Sandon Dock isn't to lose its nautical role forever. It will be home for North West Water's vessels, whose days travelling the ship canal, carrying treated sewage sludge from Manchester, are numbered. A pipeline is replacing this costly journey by canal, and sludge will be stored in 4 large sealed tanks at the new Dockland Works. Ferry across the Mersey to the Wirral, where £6 million has now been spent on providing works at Seacombe to screen sewage before it's discharged. Another screening works, costing nearly £3 million, is being provided at Birkenhead, and Morpeth Branch Dock is being drained to house this. Remember this monster, the Great Culvert? The screens at this new works will go to work on its nasty outpours. Ellesmere Port Sewage Works fought a losing battle for years. Like many others, it became overloaded. Industry brought additional demands and more bad effluent for the Mersey. But industry was there to give a helping hand too, in the end. Shell Chemicals, the work's biggest customer, chipped in £7 million towards the £10 million needed for extensions. The New Look plant opened last year and reduces industrial pollution to the Mersey by 30%. Hand in hand with the work on new sewage works is a great deal of spending on new sewers. Many old individual outfalls are being connected to new sewers going directly to the treatment works. With all this effort going on, are we about to see a Mersey miracle? Brian Alexander, the Water Authority's Planning Director.
Well, the pressure on the river is enormous, and the decline has gone on for a very long time. To expect a sudden change, I think what is really important is that now we're entering an era where we're having commitment rather than capitulation. The £170 million is, of course, just a step, although a significant one, on a long road. But what we have to have an eye on is what our customers can afford to pay.
But aren't tougher anti-pollution laws the answer, the big stick rather than big spending?
The laws, big stick means big spending. And the laws alone won't end pollution from Wirral and Liverpool and elsewhere. Anti-pollution legislation, fairly lax at that, came too late to prevent the gross pollution of the Mersey and other rivers.
But clearly industry has contributed much to the pollution.
This is true, but so have the public sewers and sewage treatment works, or rather lack of them, But we're not in the business of casting blame. A very large area has a hand in the Mersey's misfortune. In fact, industry has cooperated in cleaning up their discharges, either by providing their own treatment plants or having connections provided to sewage works. It's important, of course, that industry plays a major role in the clean-up. Nevertheless, we must face the fact, reluctantly, that some problem discharges are going to go into the Mersey for a long time. But this is because of the very nature and variety of the discharges from industry in the northwest. But it's not all gloom. The river has many pleasant places and attractions.
He's right, you know, because here and there new factories are already facing the water again, like these at Warrington. Nearby, they've even revived the regatta after more than half a century. Jolly old boating weather.
Runcorn have dropped their eggs striking to approximately 28 strokes a minute and have extended their lead overgrowth.
People enjoying the river the traditional way. But there's also the more modern style. Surprise, surprise. Mouth closed, wet-suited water skiers have gingerly staked their claim. There's obviously big interest and support from everyone in cleaning up our polluted waters, because in the end, we all benefit. So there's new faith in the old Mersey, a river that's really turning the corner.